Johansson or Johansson?
Johansson.
Hi, and welcome to today's edition of In Brandon. And we're with the library again today. And with me, we have Danielle Hubbard, the Assistant Librarian, Programming and Outreach Services, and local author, Patrick Johansson. Welcome today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
So today we're going to be talking about creative writing. And tell us about the creative writing program at the library.
Okay, yes. First I wanted to say thank you for having us on the show again, Dave. It sort of feels more familiar this time, so thank you. So yes, the Public Library in Brandon has started an adult creative writing program. So it's a program that anyone is welcome to join with no previous experience as a writer required. And so we meet once a week, and people submit their work that they would like to talk about with the group ahead of time, so that when we come to the group for the meetings in the evenings, then everyone has read each other's pieces of writing, and so then we can talk about what things work and what things perhaps are confusing in their writing. So it's not a group where we're writing in the class. It's more like a critiquing or workshopping writing group.
Right. So, and like you said, no experience. That's like if somebody has that interest in writing, they can just come in and be a part of that group. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what was the inspiration in starting this group?
I guess the inspiration, part of it is that Patrick and I are both writers.
Yeah.
So I think it would be hard to feel really inspired by it if you didn't care about writing. But I moved to Brandon in January for my position at the Public Library. And as far as I could tell, there wasn't something like this being offered in the city, like a creative writing network that anyone was welcome to be part of. And so one of my goals at the library is to provide more programming that is open to the whole community and that anyone can be a part of, and that fits a niche that isn't already being met in the city. So that was kind of my impetus from the library perspective, was like, this will be something that I think some new faces will be interested in being a part of, and that will attract more people to the library. But did you want to speak more to?
Well, partly it's just I've always found I've been in a couple of creative writing groups in town. One kind of fizzled, one is very occasional. But this was an interesting opportunity to kind of find a community outside of the people that I already know, right? So there's in the groups, there's only 2 people that I had met before, and so it's nice to see that there's more to the writing community in Brandon than the people that I already know. So for me, that's been a bonus for it. Mm-hmm.
So you touched on a little bit, but let's go in a little more depth on what a typical session when all these writers get together.
Yeah, like what is it like on a Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the library? So people trickle into the meeting room in the library, which is it's a room that the public can book for other purposes too, but it's a meeting room off the main area of the library. So people come in, and we usually chat for a little bit first.
Give the stragglers some time to show up on occasion.
There are definitely sometimes stragglers, so we talk a bit first, and then I ask who wants to volunteer to go first, because there will usually be between like 3 and 10 people in a group. And so the volunteer who goes first, they don't really do anything. What they do is it means that we discuss their piece of writing first. So say Bob volunteers. We don't have anyone named Bob, so he can be my example. So say Bob goes, okay, I'll go first. Then everyone rifles through their brain to think about the piece of writing Bob submitted, or many people bring printed out copies of everyone else's work. And so then just very informally we discuss what people like about Bob's writing. And there's always something positive to say about everyone's work. So it could be things like, you know, it really captured me. It was really exciting. I really wanted to read on. I think your choice of like words is really beautiful. You put your sentences together really well. And then that usually kind of naturally segues into other feedback too about this is what you could do to improve it, or this is an area where I was confused about.
What did you mean by?
Yeah,
Where
what
were
did you
you
mean
going
by
with?
that?
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is when people submit their work, we ask them if there's anything specific you want us to cover, let us know, right? So if you're having trouble with the dialogue, tell us that. Or if you want to know if it's interesting, or if it's if you're looking to massage it for publication, let us know that so we can kind of it'll guide our critique. And it's not just the two of us doing the critique, it's everyone at the table. Like everyone has input on it, right? So it's not like we're not dictating to you how to write, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not like come spend 2 hours having Danielle and Patrick insult your writing.
Or even lecture you.
Or lecture you. Yeah, a lot of it comes from the other people at the table. I think Patrick and I both take notes. So at the end of talking about Bob's work, Patrick and I would each give Bob our written comments too, so he could take those home with him. And the other group members don't usually do that. They usually come with like just their thoughts. But it's also really interesting because it's such a varied group and people are coming into it for such different reasons. So there are people who are hoping to enter a contest or hoping to get published, and then there are other people who are writing
Or family stories for like stuff that's meant just for the family. One person I believe had a shoebox full of photos that she wanted to kind of put stories to, and so that they wouldn't be forgotten, kind of thing. Yeah.
So various reasons and various levels. And
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
And it's good to know that when you're discussing someone's work, because if they're writing about family histories for their family, that's not necessarily going to be held to the same like rigorous critiquing as someone who's hoping to win a contest.
Right.
It's just like
So how big of a piece are they submitting, or is it usually whole pieces or portions, or
We ask that
beginnings?
they limit it to about 1,000 words, which is roughly 4 typewritten pages, just so that we have time to read it all, because everyone's reading everyone else's work. So that's, if you're reading 40 pages in a week or two, it's a fair commitment. And sometimes people will write brand new complete pieces just for the evening, and sometimes it's pieces of a larger work. It's entirely up to the individual author, and so we give what critique we can.
Good. How has it been received so far?
I think really well. At least I certainly haven't had anyone come up to me and say they hate it, so that's like a really good sign. The initial response was very positive because we had, I opened it up for 10 people. That's about how many people can fit in our meeting room. So we had spots for 10 people, and then 20 people expressed interest. So we had like the 10 spots were full, and then we had a waiting list. That hasn't exactly resulted in having 20 people actively participating in the program, but we now have 2 groups, and they each meet like on alternating weeks. And some of those people have dropped off or only come sporadically because I think it's summer and not everyone is dedicated to writing 1,000 words for each meeting. But I was in the library at work yesterday, and one of the ladies from Group 1 came and found me at work and said, I just want to let you know I really appreciate this because I always think about writing and I don't usually actually do it. So this is making me be excited about writing again and actually do it. And also people have said that they really enjoy hearing other people's work, like reading other works in progress, I think inspires you to get back to whatever project you have in your head. Like, oh yeah, I really was thinking of writing that kid's book. I guess I'll actually do it. Someone else is doing it. I'll do one too. So I think for the people who are coming regularly, it seems to be really positive. But we're doing it until the end of August, so we'll kind of evaluate then where to go from there. Like if we want to run it again or run a different similar program, or we'll think about it more critically at that point.
Right. So, but what are your plans for you really don't have any plans for after the summer for this program, or?
My plans at this point are to do something writing related in the fall, but I don't know if it will be exactly this model again, or maybe it would be groups that would just meet once a month, something like that. I also don't know what Patrick's availability will be to help me.
Yeah, summer's a little more open than the fall tends to be, but we'll see.
Yeah, Patrick is generously volunteering his time, so that's also allowed us to do as much as we are doing, because I think it's easier to, it's easier to have a conversation about writing if you know there's two people who are for sure going to be there and have read everything.
So what are the long-term plans for just creative writing in general at the library?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really want creative writing to continue to be part of what the library is providing for the community. And part of that is self-centered because I'm a writer, so it's something I care about. But part of that is also that, of course, writing is a big part of literacy and the written word. So if we're promoting literacy by having books for people to read, then I think it makes sense for us to promote literacy by helping people explore their own writing too. So yeah, I want to keep running some kind of adult writing program in the fall, and I'm also hoping to start up some kind of poetry evening that would happen maybe once a month or once every other month. That would be like an open poetry mic where people from the community can come and read something they've written in front of a group, which can be another thing that can really inspire. For some people that's terrifying and they would never want to do it, but then for other people that's really exciting and inspiring to think like, I gotta write this poem and I gotta be happy with it because I'm going to read it in front of 20 people next Thursday. And the library did host one event like that in March when I had started pretty recently at the library, and it went over really well. So I would like to start that again in the fall.
So we have a poet community in Brandon.
Yeah, that's my hope. Yeah, I think we do, but they're, like Patrick said, they're kind of disparate. Like people.
Yeah, well, and writing tends to be a very individual kind of thing, right? So it's, in my experience, I know a lot of introverts that are writers, and sometimes it takes someone saying, "Hey, let's get a group together," to get you out the door and meet with other people and discuss writing, because it's, like I say, it's very individual, but if you're trying to reach an audience, you need to be able to communicate with people, I guess. And meeting in a group is a good way to do that.
And then the interaction between everybody too, it just helps improve your
bouncing ideas off each other, or getting. I have a bad habit personally of writing things, and I know all the answers, so I don't put them into the story. So when people call me out on that, it kind of wakes me up and I have to do it. So that's my own writing issues, I guess.
And I think that's like a common experience for writers, is that you write something and I know what I do is I write something and I think like, oh my God, this is brilliant. And then you read it over, by the next day it's not as brilliant. And also when other people read it, then they point out all the things that don't make sense. So it's like Patrick said, you think, well, this is so obvious that this is about, my mother dying, and someone else reads it and goes like, oh, what a good breakup poem. It's not what I meant at all. Like, so things like that are like, wow, when you just read your own writing, it can seem really clear what you're talking about, and it sometimes is and sometimes isn't. So I think another long-term goal that touches on what Patrick said about writing being a pretty isolating activity is to try to network people or provide people an opportunity to meet each other. So maybe some of the people that we've been meeting with over the summer will continue to meet or continue to exchange writing, and it may or may not be at the library with the help of Patrick and I. It could be, they could do it in their own homes, or maybe they've just made connections of someone else to share their work with.
I do like it being I do like the library's involvement though, because it feels like a natural fit, right?
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Speaking as I've long been a fan of the library and of libraries in general, but the fact that it took this long to get a creative writing program going at the library, it's an interesting. It seems so natural, but it took so long to get here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
I was going to say, I think probably part of the reason it took a while to get going is that writing's also really personal. Like, people are writing about things they care about.
Right.
And so even if it's a light topic, it's still something that's coming from you. And so I think that can be an intimidating program to run unless you're confident. Like, I would never run a music program, even if I thought that would be a good fit for the library. Like, I'm not musical, and I don't think I could do it justice. So I think unless you have someone who is a writer themselves, it would be a really tough thing to facilitate. And I think the other part of it too is, that it's like kind of scary. It's harder than having a book club. You're talking about someone else's work.
Right.
But if it's writing, you're talking about things you feel strongly about that you may or may not be expressing well. Like, it's kind of a intimidating prospect, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So BU also has a creative writing program.
Mm-hmm.
How does this relate to the BU program?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I guess when I moved to Brandon, I discovered quickly that BU had a writing program, and that's awesome for such a smaller university. Our program is not connected to BU, and it's not as substantial as BU by far. So as much as I'm excited about the program that the library is offering, it's not like you're going to come out of the summer with Patrick and I going like, yeah, that's a real mark on my resume, and I've just received all this professional training. It's not that level.
Right.
So I think that the vision for our program is if you're a BU writing student, you're absolutely welcome to join us too, but it's more, I think what we're seeing is it's more people who are recently retired and exploring other ways to spend their time, or they finished the BU program already and they want to make sure they keep on writing.
Or it's just something they've always wanted to do, or something like that.
More of a community rather than a.
We're not marking you.
Yeah.
We don't have goals for you. We're not requiring that you write. We're not. Yeah, we're not a. It's not a class. It's a group.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of grassroots.
Yeah, and I would say we're not even we're not really competing in any way. It's not.
Yeah.
We're two different entities, and we're more of a recreational, I suppose, group.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Right. So all adults in this group, so it's kind of an adult group, but is there anything similar or anything coming up for children in a creative writing program?
Oh, yes. Actually at the library, by we, I mean me, I'm also running, just for the month of April, I ran a youth program in creative writing, so it was for 8 to 12-year-olds, and also a teen program for 13 and over. And I'm doing that again now in July, whatever month this is. I almost said June. So it's just for the 4 weeks of this month, and I meet with a group of kids, and we do it's not the same though as the adult program, because they don't bring work to the class. Instead, we actually write during the class, and it's been interesting because I found it's very different with kids. They care a lot less, from my experience so far, they care a lot less about perfecting what they've written, and it's really about oh, I got this crazy idea and I just want to write it down, and then after the class they don't even want to keep their stories. They're always just oh, Danielle, you hang on to this, I don't want to keep it, I'll write another one next week. So I don't know. I'm not sure at what age that changes, so that people want to keep their stories and work on them. So it's a really different mentality. But did you write when you were a teenager?
I started writing when I was in probably grade 2, and I mostly for school and stuff like that. But yeah, I wrote as a teenager. I wrote in university. I finally got published in my 30s, so it's been a long road.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started out, I would write something and then it was done. I get my mark and move on to the next thing. Yeah. It's only in the last, I don't know, 15 years that it's sort of become, okay, you write it and then you edit it.
Yeah, I think that that's a really tough transition for people, because I guess when I was a teenager, I was in a writing group that was run through a rec center, and for whatever reason, like, me and the other teenagers were really keen, so we did do a lot of like rewriting our stuff, but still not to the level that I think you do once you're an adult and you're really committed to writing. Like, I'd rewrite things, like I'd edit it like once or twice and think like, whoa, it's perfect now. So yeah, I think as you get older you realize like, oh, actually the writing it is like less than 10% probably of all the time you're going to put into it, and most of it is like,
I've seen it said that writing is rewriting, which is true and onerous sometimes.
Yeah.
So is there any thought about or discussion amongst your group or even amongst the youth groups and stuff of not publishing but like posting some of the stories and you know some of the works of the local people who, you know, want to share their work but not necessarily publish it?
Two things. One was that with my younger kids, like the 8 to 12-year-olds, they were really, really keen that whatever they wrote should be in a book in the library. So I haven't figured out how to make that happen, because like their current production is really not like complete enough to be printed and put in a book in the library. But I like their idea, and maybe that could happen if I could get them to edit at least a tiny bit. Then that I think could happen. And the other idea was that the Westman Journal actually approached me and asked if we would like to submit, if our group would like to submit some pieces for the journal. So we've been in discussion with them about like what's the easiest way to do that, and because Patrick and I don't want to pick who's going in, and
well, and it's also up to them, because they, of course, retain the copyright and the rights to all their work, right? So we can't just say, okay, here, journal, have this writing. We have to make sure that the author is willing and understands that they're being published.
That's good. And are some of them interested in going forward with that?
We haven't broached it with the group yet, so this is a spoiler. Because I think we've been trying to figure out, like, between the two of us and the editor of the journal, what the best way to do it all is, so that no one's taking on a huge editing load, but also so that we're not encroaching on copyright.
Better hurry up and talk to them before we air this.
That's okay. You can send the spoiler out. It's all right. They can handle it.
So, do you have any tips or tricks or anything for the listeners on writing?
Oh, Patrick.
Well, I've actually. Not this year, but the previous 5 years, I've done some mentoring of young writers in Brandon, and some of the things that I tell them is I like to bring in lists of rules of writing from various authors that I enjoy, and the first thing I tell them is these are not rules, these are guidelines, these are what works for the author, right? So if you can look online, you can find what Neil Gaiman has to say about writing, you can find what Elmore Leonard has to say about writing, you can find any number of authors have a list of rules, but it's always what works for them. And so take what works for you and discard the rest is my attitude. And also, the writing is rewriting. It's a hard truth, but it's the truth. Other than that, the one other thing that I would say is understand that I forget who said it. It might have been Neil Gaiman, but the first draft that you write of your story is you telling yourself the story, and then the next draft is you telling other people, right? So get it out first, and then rewrite it, and then show it to people.
Right.
I'd say one of the main things I would say to people who want to be writers or who are writers is, well, one thing that many of those authors will say is like that the most important thing is to do it. So you have to like keep writing.
Yes.
And I think that that's really, really true. But I also think that sometimes that can kind of stymie people, and they can feel like, oh, well, now I haven't written for like a month, so I guess I'm not a writer anymore, and I guess I won't do it again. And I think especially if you're talking with people who are you know, they're like working professionals or they're working moms or they have tons of other things in their lives. It's like, yeah, it's really important to write and do it as much as you can if that's what you want to get better at, but also, you know, understand that you probably won't be able to do it for 4 hours a day until your Neil Gaiman level of successful. Right. So,
yeah, there's a common saying that you're supposed to write every day, and that's it's a great idea, but it's not always possible. And like you say, just because you can't write every day doesn't mean that you're a failure, right? I don't write every day. I should, but I don't. So I don't feel that I'm failing.
It just means some days are like moving forward more than others.
I'd like to do better, but I also know I could do a lot worse.
Yeah.
So is writing kind of like an athlete? Like the more you practice as an athlete, the better you get?
Yes.
Writing, the more you...
Yeah.
I would argue that, yeah. It practice makes perfect, or practice makes better anyways.
I think one good thing about being a writer, though, is that there's a greater potential to like continue improving at it. I guess I read the biography, or it was like a memoir by Haruki Murakami. He's a Japanese author who writes really like wacky, surreal books. But he's also a marathon runner, and I'm also a marathon runner. So I read it and was like, oh my God, I love this memoir. This is the best memoir ever. Except one of the things he keeps saying is, I think he's in his late 50s or 60s or something. And so one of his points in his memoir was that he felt like he was training just as hard for marathons, but he was doing slower times because he was getting older. And I really like the fact that with writing, I don't think that happens. Like, that it's something you can keep on slowly building on your whole entire life. I don't think there's ever a point where it's like, oh, well, you know, you've like hit your prime and now you can't do it anymore, which can happen with running marathons or a lot of other activities.
Right,
so
right.
I think writing is very like healthy that way. You can keep on developing it.
Good. Do you have anything else you want to add about the creative writing program?
We're pretty friendly and people should join.
Right.
That's a really good finish.
Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
If anybody out there is interested in the creative writing group or learning how to write and getting ideas and stuff like that, they can just contact Danielle at the library and
Perfect.
You'll hook them right up.
Thank you.
Excellent.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Dave.
All right, thank you.